My name is Charlotte. I'm 28 years old. The cemetery sat just outside Mill Haven, past the feed store, past the old Baptist church, where the road narrowed and the pine trees leaned in so close it felt like the whole town had lowered its voice. Rain had passed an hour earlier, not enough to clear the air. The sky still hung low and swollen, dark as bruised fruit. Wet grass clung to my heels. Folding chairs had sunk into the mud. The air smelled like funeral lilies, wet earth, black coffee, pressed wool, and the cold metallic edge that comes right before another storm. My husband's casket was already in the ground. That is still the sentence that catches in my throat. Not had been lowered. Not was being buried. Was in the ground. People were breaking apart into clusters. Is drifting toward their cars with paper cups in hand, speaking in soft funeral voices, like tenderness counted more if it stayed quiet. Women whispered behind tissues. Men kept their jackets buttoned and their eyes on the mud. Nobody looked at me for more than a second or two. I was 28 years old, in a black dress I had panic bought from Macy's 2 days earlier, with mascara dried under my eyes, my hair damp at the temples, and my hands so cold they did not feel like mine. I stood there staring at the fresh dirt over Owen. 12 days earlier, he had been alive. 12 days earlier, I had been sitting beside a hospital bed listening to him complain about the pudding and ask whether I had eaten. 12 days earlier, he had still been here, warm and impatient and breathing. Now there was damp soil over him. Flattened flowers near the temporary marker. Yellow clay stuck to the hem of my dress. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the trees. Not close, just close enough to tighten everything. I heard Diane before I fully saw her. My mother-in-law always moved with purpose, at church suppers, at pediatric fundraisers, in hospital corridors, in other people's kitchens. In grief, apparently, too. Her heels pressed into the mud beside mine, and her perfume cut through the lilies. Something expensive and sharp, dry, controlled, so completely unlike the weather that it made me turn before she even spoke. Then she did. Stop crying, pack your bags, leave now. For a second, I honestly thought I had misheard her. The wind was moving under the canopy. Chairs were scraping. Somebody behind me was folding a table. My ears felt full of static and blood, and all the wrong sounds grief shoves into your head. I turned toward her slowly, blinking hard, trying to catch up to the words. Her face was dry, lipstick perfect, gloves folded in one hand like she was about to step into a meeting, not away from her son's grave. What? She leaned slightly closer. Private tone. Public cruelty. The house is family property. You've stayed long enough. Don't make this uglier than it already is. The dirt above Owen had not even settled. That was the part I could not process. Not even the insult, not even the order. Just the timing. The sheer lack of pause. The absence of anything remotely human between burying her son and trying to remove his wife. I looked past her without meaning to. A few people had heard, I knew they had. As Aunt Linda had frozen halfway to her Buick, Pastor Reed glanced over, then down at his shoes. One of Diane's church friends shifted a stack of folded chairs like he had suddenly found a very urgent task. Nobody stepped in. That silence wrapped around me tighter than Diane's voice. I live there, I said. Not for long. She looked over my face the way people look over a table after a meal, deciding what can be cleared away first. My grief seemed to offend her. It was too visible, too wet, too inconvenient. My son is gone, she said. That house belongs with his people. Gather your things and leave today. Shock eats language first. That is something I know now. It does not arrive dramatic and articulate. It strips you, leaves you holding scraps. I could think of Owen in the hospital bed. Owen's hand slack in mine. Or Owen whispering he was sorry he was so tired. Owen trying to smile through oxygen lines. Owen asking me even then if I had remembered to eat lunch. And then I had Diane in front of me, talking about bloodlines and square footage while the grave workers were still packing up shovels. I should have screamed. I did not. Grief had flattened me into something quieter than rage, and quiet to the wrong kind of person looks like surrender. Diane had spent years mistaking one for the other. She touched my elbow lightly, almost politely, as if guiding a guest toward the exit at a wedding reception. I'll have Robert there this afternoon to help with boxes. Robert, Owen's cousin, 34, broad shoulders, permanently eager to prove himself useful if Diane was watching. I'm not discussing this here, I said. Sure, then don't discuss it, just do it. There are insults that burn hot, and there are insults so cold they leave no heat at all. I turned back toward the grave because suddenly, that felt safer than looking at her face. Owen Michael Mercer. His name was printed on the temporary marker. Born in October, died in March. 2 dates. A whole marriage reduced to 2 dates and a strip of laminated paper. He was 32 when he died from complications after what was supposed to be a routine surgery. Routine. That word should be illegal after loss. Doctors kept saying it. Routine. Expected recovery. Unexpected turn. Sudden decline. None of those phrases had a body in them. None of them held a wife upright in a cemetery when her knees wanted to give. Then Diane said with a little breath of irritation, your crying won't change anything. As if mourning him out loud was bad manners. As if I were embarrassing her. I bent, picked up the black umbrella someone had left near the chairs, and walked toward my car because I knew if I stayed another 10 seconds, I might collapse in the mud. People parted for me with those soft, helpless looks people wear when they want credit for pity, without the burden of action. By the time I reached my Honda, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice. I got inside, shut the door, and sat there with rain starting again, fine and cold against the windshield. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from Diane. Robert will meet you at the house at 3. Please be respectful and take only what belongs to you. I read that line once, then again, then a third time. What belongs to you? Plus, my husband had just been buried, and his mother was already speaking to me like I had been subletting a spare room. I drove home on autopilot, wipers smearing the road into gray streaks. We lived in a brick ranch house in Ashby County, just outside Millhaven. The kind of place with a creaking porch swing, a patchy lawn that Owen kept meaning to fix, and HOA letters that appeared if your trash bin stayed visible for too long after pickup day. Owen hated the HOA. He used to wave those letters at me and say, "One day I'm mailing them a Walmart receipt and a prayer." I could hear him say it so clearly that it nearly broke me harder than the cemetery had. When I pulled into the driveway, Diane's SUV was already there. So was Robert's truck. The front door stood open. For one long second, I sat frozen behind the wheel, rain ticking on the roof, and wished with a force that made me sick that Owen would step out onto the porch in that faded Alabama hoodie, coffee in one hand, rubbing sleep from his eyes, asking why I was sitting there like a stalker. I had lived in that house with him for 3 years. I had painted the guest room myself. I had planted rosemary by the back steps. My name was on the internet bill, the electric bill, the grocery lists, the dog-eared recipe cards on the fridge. Inside, it already looked less like grief and more like repossession. Diane stood in the living room with 2 cardboard boxes open on the rug. She had taken our wedding photo off the mantel and set it face down on the side table. That image hit me so hard I actually stopped walking. Robert stood near the hallway with his hands in his jacket pockets, trying very hard to look useful and not involved. Diane glanced up. Good, I'd rather this be quick. You came into my house. My son's house. My house too. Robert shifted his weight and gave me a pained little look, like he wanted to play reasonable man in the middle of a knife fight. Charlotte, maybe it's best if everybody stays calm. I laughed once. It came out wrong, sharp, ugly, tired. He's been dead less than a week, Robert. Diane had already opened the sideboard drawers. Owen's high school baseball cards were stacked on the coffee table like evidence in some private trial. A plastic bin near the hallway held my shoes. Not all of them. Just the ones from the front closet. Somehow that made it worse. It is one thing to be disliked, another thing entirely to be sorted. You need essentials, Diane said. Clothes. Oh, toiletries, personal items, furniture stays. According to who? According to common sense. She used that same church lady tone she always used when correcting potluck recipes. Patient, mild, meant to make resistance look unstable. My fingers clenched around my car keys so hard the metal bit into my palm. I looked around the room. The gray throw blanket from Target I bought that first winter. Owen's boots by the back door. The coffee table he found on Facebook Marketplace and spent 2 Saturdays sanding in the garage. The faint ring from a Starbucks cup near one corner because he never used coasters no matter how often I fussed. Life was all over that room. Mine, his, ours. Diane was moving through it like an appraiser. I'm not leaving today, I said. Something shifted in her face then, not softer, harder. You don't have the money to maintain this place, she said. You don't know what Owen arranged. You don't know the debts. You don't know what obligations are involved. That word caught in me. Arranged. What did he arrange? Adult matters, things he discussed with family. Family. That old blade again. I swallowed. My throat already hurt from crying and rain and everything I had not said. I was his wife. For a few years. It landed exactly how she meant it to land. A measurement, a minimization, a demotion. Owen and I had not married recklessly, not by our standards. I was 25, he was 29. We met at a July 4th barbecue when a little girl almost knocked over a tray of ribs, and he caught it one-handed, then looked embarrassed that I had seen him do it. He was warm without being slick, funny without performing. He texted me after our first date. You have the kind of quiet that makes me tell the truth faster. I kept that message for years. Diane never liked me. Not because I was cruel, not because I was lazy, because Owen was softer with me than he had ever been with her, and some mothers mistake that for theft. She had made small cuts our whole marriage. Asking at church whether I planned to contribute properly once we had children. Telling people I was still adjusting when what she meant was still proving myself. Bringing up Owen's ex-fiancée every Thanksgiving like a weather report. Acting surprised when he cooked dinner. Acting amused when he did laundry. Acting as if every tenderness between us was some soft corruption I had introduced into a family built on harder things. Oh, you can stay with your sister, Diane said. I don't have a sister. She blinked once, not embarrassed, just briefly inconvenienced, like she had confused me with a name in a file. Robert looked away. That hurt more than I expected. Cruelty from Diane was weather. I knew it. But that level of indifference meant she had already decided I was removable. I'm going to my bedroom, I said. Take what is yours. I walked down the hall with my pulse banging at the base of my neck. Our room still smelled faintly of Owen's shaving cream and the eucalyptus spray I used on the sheets. His side of the bed was slightly dipped. His phone charger still hung from the outlet. One of his gray t-shirts was still thrown over the chair because I had carried it around the night he died and could not make myself wash it. There were boxes on the floor. My dresser drawers were open. Diane had touched my underwear, my journals, the black dress from our first anniversary dinner. Something inside me finally cracked into anger, but it was not bright anger, not the kind that gives speeches. It was grief anger, heavy, slow, built from broken brick. I packed because I was too stunned to think strategically. Jeans, sweaters, underwear, my laptop, toiletries, my medication. A framed photo of Owen and me at Orange Beach, both sunburned and smiling into the wind. My old apartment lease folder, though I did not know why I grabbed it. A grocery bag full of chargers. The little ceramic fox Owen bought me at a Christmas market because he said it looked judgmental. Then, on the nightstand under a paperback novel, I found the spare keyring. A one house key, one mailbox key, and a small brass key Owen had never labeled. The sight of it stopped me. A memory rose so clean, it felt like someone had opened a door. 18 months earlier, after Christmas dinner, after Diane had cornered Owen about life insurance between slices of pecan pie, he had laughed and said, "If I die first, don't let my mother near my paperwork." I had smacked his arm and told him not to talk like that. He kissed my forehead and said, "I'm serious enough for both of us, Charlie. Remember it." At the time, I rolled my eyes. Now I stood in our bedroom with that tiny brass key in my palm, and a tremor moved through me. Why did it feel like I was standing at the edge of a sentence he had already started for me? Diane called down the hall. "Charlotte, what we need to be done." I slipped the brass key into the side pocket of my purse. I left that house with 2 suitcases, 1 laundry basket, my laptop bag, and a body that felt hollowed out. Rain had stopped, but the driveway still gleamed. Robert loaded my things into the trunk without meeting my eyes. When I pulled away, Diane stood under the porch eave, dry and straight-backed, like a woman watching a contractor clear debris. Not a grieving mother, not a woman in shock, a woman securing territory. I drove to a Motel 6 off Highway 14 because it was the first place my brain could name. Tessa would have taken me in if I had called. I knew that. But I could not handle kindness and questions and a couch all in the same hour. I checked in under my own name and paid with the joint checking account debit card Owen and I used for groceries, bills, and gas. The clerk gave me room 112 and a key card that failed twice before the lock finally took it. The room smelled like bleach, old air conditioning, and somebody else's cigarettes. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally cried hard enough to shake. That is the thing nobody tells you. Grief is not noble. It is physical. It drags muscle with it. My chest hurt. My jaw hurt. The backs of my eyes felt scraped raw. I lay there in funeral black, staring at the popcorn ceiling, while trucks hissed past on the highway. At some point, I kicked off my shoes and saw dried mud along the hem of my dress. Dirt from Owen's grave. That nearly folded me in half. Around 9, my phone buzzed, fraud alert from our bank. A large transfer request pending from joint savings account. Reply, yes, if authorized. I sat up so fast the room tilted. The amount was not listed, but the timing hit like ice water. I typed no, then stared at the message again. Joint savings. Owen handled most of our long-term savings because he loved spreadsheets and hated surprises. I handled monthly bills. We had always talked openly, or I thought we had. But in the hospital, there had been hours and hours and hours of cafeteria lines, plastic chairs, bad coffee, IV alarms, forms, updates, hope, exhaustion. I had trusted that everything outside the room could wait. Maybe it had not. I called the after-hours number, fought through a maze of recordings, and finally got a woman named Melissa whose voice sounded young and careful. "I can place a temporary hold and note possible unauthorized activity," she said. "For more detail, you'll need to come into the branch tomorrow with identification." "Was the transfer initiated online?" A pause. "I can't provide full detail on this call, ma'am, but I can tell you the request was made today." Today, the day of the funeral. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there in silence with the television off and my pulse climbing. Then a line rose in my mind, so clear it felt spoken. If anything feels rushed, slow down and read everything twice. Owen used to say that when I signed leases or bought car insurance, or nearly got tricked by one of those fake unpaid toll text scams, he believed panic was where other people's hands got into your pockets. I took the brass key out of my purse and turned it over in my fingers. No label. Worn smooth. Just after midnight, I texted Tessa. Can I come by tomorrow? She answered almost immediately. Of course. Bring everything. Tessa lived in a small upstairs apartment over her aunt's hair salon, across from a Dollar General and half a mile from the county courthouse. We met working retail years ago and stayed friends because she had the rare gift of asking questions without tearing wounds wider. She opened the door in leggings and an old auburn sweatshirt, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug before I said a word. She made coffee strong enough to restart the dead. I told her about the funeral, the cemetery, the house, Diane, Robert, the text. Tessa set her mug down very carefully. She did that the same day? At the cemetery. Tessa closed her eyes for one beat, then opened them. DT Charlotte, that's not grief. That's a plan. That sentence steadied me more than comfort would have. A plan. Not me being dramatic, not me reading malice into pain. A plan. I went to the bank after lunch still wearing the same black cardigan because my clean clothes were buried somewhere in the suitcases. The branch manager printed records and confirmed that an online transfer had been initiated from our joint savings to an account ending in 4421. The request had been blocked because I denied it through text verification. Whose account is that? He hesitated, then gave me the careful legal answer. He could not disclose the receiving account holder without further review, but he could note the transfer as disputed and lock all online changes pending probate documentation. Probate. Yeah, that word changed the texture of the whole thing. It stopped being only family cruelty. It became legal weather. On my way out, I stood in the parking lot and compared the mailbox key from the ring to the brass key in my purse, then to the memory of the lockbox Owen kept in the hall closet. The mailbox key was obvious. The lockbox key was different. The brass key was smaller, older. Not that. That evening, sitting cross-legged on Tessa's rug, I went through every paper I had grabbed in my rush. Receipts, W-2 copies, warranty slips, a Walmart receipt from January with cat litter, cold medicine, and a $9.88 extension cord. My old lease, 2 greeting cards, nothing. Then a folded paper slipped from the side pocket of my laptop bag. I opened it and felt everything in me go still. Ashby County Probate Court. Not a full filing, a stamped receipt for document registration. County Clerk, case number 2024-17823, registered by Mercer and Hill, attorneys at law. Date, 6 days before Owen died. I read it once, then again, then a third time. There was no description of the document, just the case reference and filing fee. Owen had seen a probate attorney 6 days before he died. He had said nothing to me. Or maybe he had tried, and I had missed it between medication charts and terror and false hope. Memory becomes cruel after loss. It keeps handing you moments and asking whether you were careless with them. I remembered the hospital room, rain on the window, Owen groggy but awake, squeezing my hand and asking if I still kept the blue folder where we put grown-up stuff. I had told him yes, in the hall closet lockbox. He nodded and said, "So, good girl," barely teasing. Then Diane came in with soup in a thermos, and the conversation died. At the time, I thought he meant bills. Now I did not know what he meant. The next morning, I went to Mercer and Hill. Their office sat in a brick building near the courthouse with magnolia trees out front and a notary sign in the lobby. I nearly turned around twice. Places like that made me feel young in the wrong way. Too loud in my own head. Too ordinary. But grief had burned most of my embarrassment out of me. I walked in with my purse, my folder, and a copy of our marriage certificate. The receptionist took my name. 20 minutes later, a gray-haired attorney named Mr. Hill brought me into his office, shut the door, and sat down across from me. "Mrs. Mercer? I'm very sorry for your loss." I had heard that sentence so many times by then it usually passed through me. But something in his face changed when he saw the receipt in my hand. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "In my things. I didn't know it existed." He folded his hands. "Your husband came here last week," he said. "He was very clear that certain documents were to be provided to you directly if his condition worsened." I stared at him. "I never got anything." A brief pause, the kind that tells you more than a sentence. "We attempted contact. No one contacted me." He turned slightly toward his computer. "Our office called the number listed for the marital residence and left a message. We also sent notice by certified mail." Certified mail. The house, the landline, the mailbox key. And Diane had been in the house before I got back from the funeral. Mr. Hill opened a drawer, removed a file, and set it on the desk. "Your husband updated his will," he said. "He also transferred the deed of the marital home into survivorship structure 2 days before surgery complications required ICU transfer. He specifically stated that the house was to pass to you outside dispute." The room actually seemed to tilt. "To me? To you, solely." I gripped the chair arms. "He was concerned there would be pressure after his death," Mr. Hill said. Those were his words. My vision blurred. Not from tears first, from the force of the truth rearranging the room. Diane had thrown me out of my own house, not because she believed she had the right, because she knew she did not. Mr. Hill slid an envelope toward me. "There is also a letter," he said, "handwritten. He requested that it be released only to you." My name was written across the front in Owen's uneven block letters. Charlotte. My fingers went weak over the paper. "Would you like a moment alone?" Mr. Hill asked. I nodded. He stepped out. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. "Charlie, if you're reading this, things went the way I prayed they wouldn't. I hate that for you. I hate leaving you in a world I'm not standing in. But listen carefully. Nothing about our life was an accident. Not this house, not our savings, not the way I listed things. I did it because I know my mother. I have loved her all my life and still learned to lock doors. Do not let grief make you surrender what is yours. Do not let guilt make you polite when someone is trying to bury you beside me. If she moves fast, it means she's afraid. Slow down. Read everything twice. Ask for help. Trust Mr. Hill. Trust Tessa if you need a place. I love you larger than this ending." Oh. I bent over that letter and cried into the paper. Not pretty crying, not graceful, the kind that folds your ribs and empties your face. He knew. He had known. Maybe not that he would die, maybe not exactly, but he knew Diane. He knew what fear and money did to her. He had tried, in the middle of everything, to leave me a lock against her. Love can end. Love can also still be preparing a way. When Mr. Hill came back in, I wiped my face and asked the only question that mattered. "Can I go back to my house?" He did not hesitate. "Yes." That one word felt like a floor returning under me. He printed copies for me, will summary, deed transfer, and notice records. He explained there would still be probate matters because of other accounts, but the house itself was clear. Then he added something colder. "Your husband also removed his mother as contingent beneficiary on one insurance policy and named you directly on a retirement account. He made those changes the same day. We can discuss amounts once the file is fully released, but I recommend immediate account protection." Same day. Owen had not spent his final lucid week forgetting me. He had spent it fortifying me. I left the office with the folder against my chest and called Tessa from the parking lot. She knew. "I know." "No," I said, breath shaking. She knew. About the house. The will. She tried to move me before I found out. Tessa went silent for one breath. Then she said, "Then stop crying in front of her. But from now on, make her explain herself." That line shifted something in me. I did not stop grieving. I stopped handing Diane my confusion. That afternoon, I went back to the house. Mr. Hill's office had already emailed Diane notice of deed status and legal occupancy. I expected her on the porch. Instead, I found the door locked and a new security sticker on the frame. I stared at it for 3 long seconds, then unlocked the door with my key and went inside. More had been moved. My photo boxes were missing from the hall closet. Owen's desk drawers stood open. The blue folder from the lockbox was gone, and on the kitchen counter sat a sticky note in Diane's handwriting. "You should have let family handle this." I took a picture of the note, then I walked through every room slowly. The filing cabinet had been opened. As the hospital billing folder sat on the counter, clumsily reclosed. Owen's external hard drive was gone. A jewelry tray in the bedroom stood empty. My pulse settled into something colder than fear. Panic is loud. Proof is quiet. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line and reported unlawful entry and possible document removal. An officer came out, took notes, walked the house, and spoke in that measured southern tone that sounds courteous while promising almost nothing. Because Diane had a family relationship and had entered the home before while Owen was alive, the matter was messy. But the report existed now. That mattered. Paper trails are the bones under justice. I changed the locks the next morning. I also found the certified mail slip tucked in the kitchen junk drawer under takeout menus and expired coupons. And the envelope itself was gone, but the slip proved delivery had been attempted the day before the funeral. Then something else surfaced. A voicemail notification from an unknown number, timestamped the morning of the funeral while I had been at the cemetery. I stood in the kitchen with one hand on the counter and played it. "Mrs. Mercer? This is Elaine from Mercer and Hill calling again regarding the urgent release materials left by your husband. We've been unable to reach you directly. Please contact us as soon as possible." The call had gone to our landline. My phone had been with me all day. Diane had likely heard that message before I ever knew it existed. She had been ahead of me on purpose. That night, memory sharpened in a different way. Owen in the hospital. Diane out getting coffee. His voice weak and dry. "Oh, if she starts making decisions too quickly, call Hill." I had tried to hush him, told him not to talk like that. He smiled a tired little smile and said, "Charlie, promise me you won't just survive people. Fight back smarter than they expect." At the time I thought he meant his mother in general. He meant specifics. Timetables, documents, access. The next week became a different kind of mourning. By day I collected bank statements, insurance contact numbers, hospital billing records, property copies from the county office, screenshots, voicemails, the report number from the sheriff, proof of the blocked transfer. Mr. Hill discovered that Diane had called his office twice after Owen's death, identifying herself as handling family matters and requesting release of file materials. He refused. She had then sent Robert to the house while I was at the funeral to help secure documents. Secure. That word sounds respectable until you see the hands using it. By night, I sat on the living room floor with Owen's letter in my lap and let myself miss him properly. That was the strangest split in it. Part of me was now sharp, collecting, locking, protecting. Another part was still just a wife on the floor, wrecked by the ordinary absence of one man. I missed the ordinary Owen most. The man who bought oranges when we already had oranges because he could never remember what was in the fruit drawer. The man who groaned through DMV lines like they were war. The man who hung Christmas lights crooked and called it charm. The man who left voice notes instead of texts because he said my name sounded better when spoken. That is why everything after stayed clean in me. I was not trying to replace loss with victory. No revenge on earth does that. I was trying to keep Owen's truth from being buried under Diane's version. The first social crack came through Pastor Reed. He called 3 days after I got back into the house. "Charlotte," he said, I feel I should have said something at the cemetery. You didn't. A long exhale on the other end. No, I didn't. Silence sat between us for a second. Then he told me Diane had been telling people Owen wanted property returned to blood family because I was young enough to start over. Start over. As if widowhood were a haircut. Would you like the actual deed documents? I asked. A beat. Yes. I emailed them that evening. Linda called the next morning, then Owen's old baseball coach, and then one of the church women, who had always brought pound cake to potlucks and wore too much powder in summer. Every one of them sounded some version of embarrassed. Every one of them had heard Diane's story. Every one of them got records from me. No speeches, no dramatic explanations, just paper. The facts started moving through town without my help. Diane responded the way people do when control starts leaking. She got meaner. First the texts. You should be ashamed. You manipulated a sick man. Everyone sees what you are. Then the calls. Mr. Hill told me to begin documenting everything and recording any direct contact allowed under state law. So when she called again, I answered and recorded. He made those changes under medication, Diane said at once. You know that. The attorney disagrees. Attorneys take money from whoever cries hardest. I let the silence sit for 1 second, then asked very quietly, Did you try to transfer money from our savings on the day of the funeral? I heard her inhale, a sharp little intake. Then the line went dead. Sometimes the strongest answer is not a speech. Sometimes it is one question with evidence behind it. A week later, Mr. Hill found something bigger. Owen had left a sealed USB drive with the office as supplemental personal material, not legally operative, but intended for release to me if needed. Inside were scanned account records, household spreadsheets, copies of beneficiary changes, and a short phone video Owen had recorded from the hospital 2 nights before surgery. I watched it alone at our dining table, the one where we used to eat takeout and argue about whether tomatoes belonged in breakfast. His face on the screen was thinner than I remembered, hospital pale, eyes tired. But still Owen. Still him. He looked straight at the camera. If this is being watched after I'm gone, he said, then Charlie, first, I love you. Second, if my mother is acting like she has authority over this house or my accounts, she does not. I documented everything because I know how she gets when fear and money meet in the same room. If she tells people you weren't really my family, that's her talking, not me. You are my family. You are my home. Anyone hearing otherwise should be ashamed of themselves. I pressed my fist to my mouth so hard it hurt. Then the video kept going. There's one more thing. Last fall, I found out Mom borrowed against the cabin lot Granddad left the family and tried to use my name in discussions with the bank without my consent. It never completed because I shut it down. After that, I changed more than she realizes. If she's moving fast, it's because confusion covers her. Don't let it. The cabin lot. I had heard about it for years and barely thought of it. Some piece of family land outside town. Old bitterness, old pride. Diane called it what keeps generations tied. Owen called it a mosquito field with emotional baggage. Now it mattered. Mr. Hill confirmed later that Diane's finances were worse than people knew. Credit cards nearly maxed. A second mortgage on her own house. An insurance lapse the year before. Nothing criminal by itself, but enough to explain desperation. How enough to explain why this was never just grief. She had not only wanted control after Owen died, she had needed it. I could have moved fast then. I could have blasted the video to the entire town, forwarded her texts to every churchwoman with an email address, dragged her publicly. But Owen knew me. He knew anger would tempt me toward speed. He had left me a better route, so I waited for the right room. Probate's preliminary hearing was scheduled for the second week of April. Not some big movie courtroom. Just filings, confirmation, disputes, signatures, assets, procedural language under fluorescent lights. But that room would force Diane, me, attorneys, and family into a place where lies had to sit with paperwork. Before then, she made one more private move. I came home from the grocery store one evening with eggs, cereal, and coffee pods, and found the flower pot on my porch smashed. Inside the spilled dirt lay the ceramic fox Owen had bought me, snapped cleanly in half. No note, no witness. Just enough to say I can still reach you. I crouched there in the fading light with dirt on my palms, and for a second all the calm I had been building left me. Not because it was just a fox. Because grief hates vandalism. It feels like someone spitting in the softest place you still have left. I took pictures, filed another report, saved another date and time. Then I placed the two broken halves of the fox on the mantel facing Diane's favorite chair. Not everything broken stays lost. Probate morning came bright and cold. I wore navy instead of black. I wanted to look alive. The courthouse smelled like toner, old wood polish, and impatience. Tessa came with me and sat in the hallway while we waited. Mr. Hill carried two thick binders. Diane arrived with Robert and her own attorney, a tired-looking man whose face suggested he had learned some unpleasant truths later than he would have liked. Diane saw me and stiffened. I had not answered her last 8 texts. There is power in letting a liar keep talking into silence until their own voice starts sounding strange to them. Inside, the judge moved through the preliminary matters quickly. Estate assets, executor confirmation, document acknowledgement. Diane tried twice to present herself as the logical steward of family property. Mr. Hill corrected her twice with paperwork. Each time her mouth hardened a little more. Then the questions about household contents and account interference came up. Mr. Hill requested permission to enter supplemental evidence regarding attempted unauthorized transfer, interference with certified legal notice, and misrepresentation of deed status to the surviving spouse and community members. Diane's attorney closed his eyes for half a second. He had not wanted those words said aloud. The judge looked over his glasses. Mrs. Mercer, did you tell the widow to leave the marital home before ownership review? Diane straightened in her seat. I acted in grief and confusion. And for the first time since the cemetery, I looked directly at her and answered in a room where records mattered. At the grave? She turned toward me, and I saw it then. Not remorse, not sorrow, annoyance. Only annoyance that I was still here, still upright, still occupying space she thought grief would empty. My son would have wanted stability, she said. Mr. Hill slid the video transcript across the table. The deceased appears to have anticipated this exact issue, he said. There are moments when a lie does not explode. It folds quietly. That was one of them. No gasps, no shouting, just paper moving from hand to hand while the room adjusted around truth. Diane's attorney read the transcript first, then Diane. I watched the color shift in her face line by line. By the time she reached, "You are my family, you are my home," something in her expression had gone thin and wrong. Do you dispute the authenticity? The judge asked. No? Do you dispute the deed transfer? I believe he was influenced. Mr. Hill placed competency notes and witness signatures before the court. So, do you have evidence for that belief? The judge asked. She did not. Because belief is a flimsy thing when fact walks in wearing dates. The bank records came next. Attempted transfer, funeral date, account hold, the landline notice log, her calls to Mr. Hill's office, the home entry report, photos of moved documents, the texts. She sat through each one with the posture of a woman trying to hold together a wall already split down the middle. Robert looked at her once then, sharply. I had wondered whether he knew all of it. That look told me he did not. Then came Pastor Reed's statement. Linda's. Notes from two churchwomen Diane had told that I was not on the deed and had been trying to clean out accounts. Statements do not win everything, but they expose pattern matters, pattern. Finally, the judge asked whether there was any chance of private family resolution. Diane turned toward me as if the room no longer existed. Charlotte, she said, your husband is dead. Must you make a spectacle now? The sentence almost stole my breath because of how perfectly upside down it was. She had put me out of my own home at his funeral. She had touched my drawers. She had tried to move our money. She had lied to the town. And now she wanted dignity protected. I looked at her and felt something settle instead of rise. That surprised me. Calm is not the absence of pain. It is pain that has found its spine. You told me to stop crying before the dirt settled over him, I said. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. You tried to erase me before I had even gone home from burying my husband. You weren't protecting his memory. You were hiding from it. Something flickered in her face then. Small, but real. The first fracture in her certainty. She had expected a pleading girl, a confused widow, a woman asking to be let back in. She had not expected a wife with records, an attorney, and her dead son's own words. You keep saying family like it's a weapon, I said. Owen did not agree with you. He planned for me. He protected me from you, and he was right to. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. The judge ruled the house outside immediate dispute, affirmed my occupancy rights, directed no interference, and ordered further review of the account actions and property access claims. Not cinematic thunder. Better. Binding paper. A clerk stamp. Consequence that sticks. Afterward, in the hallway, Linda came to me with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry I didn't step in at the cemetery. I nodded because I did not trust my voice. Pastor Reed touched my shoulder and said he would be correcting what needed correcting. Robert left without speaking to Diane. Her attorney walked ahead of her toward the parking lot like he wanted distance. The town did what towns do. Talked, recalculated, adjusted old memories to fit new facts. But the story no longer belonged to Diane alone. You do not always win by striking back hardest. Sometimes, you win by refusing to disappear. The final practical piece came 2 weeks later. Through counsel, Diane returned a box of items removed from the house. Inside were my missing photo boxes, Owen's external hard drive, the blue folder from the lockbox, the certified letter envelope already opened and badly resealed, and our marriage license, bent at one corner. That bent corner hurt me in a new way. There is contempt in how some people touch paper. The blue folder held more than bills. Insurance copies, account lists, a deed duplicate, password instructions in Owen's cramped handwriting, and one extra note tucked behind the insurance page for the porch swing if I don't get back to fix it. For Charlie, who always notices the loose boards before I do. I sat on the kitchen floor and laughed through tears because of course he had written about the porch swing in the middle of estate planning. He was practical, even in love. Maybe especially in love. Over the next few months, consequences settled in the way real consequences do. Unevenly, without music, without applause. Pastor Reed privately confronted Diane about the lies, and she withdrew from church for a while after that. Linda stopped hosting Sunday lunch at Diane's house. Robert stopped mowing her lawn. The same people who once nodded along with her version now went quiet around me in grocery aisles, which in a town like ours was its own form of apology. Mr. Hill eventually confirmed formally that the receiving account for the block transfer belonged to Diane. That turned her defense of grief confusion into ash. The sheriff never turned her into a headline. Real life is rarely that tidy. But the reports remained filed. The court orders remained binding. The financial record remained noted. She understood consequences now, which mattered more than spectacle. I stayed. That is the heart of it. I stayed. I repaired the porch swing using the hardware Owen had already bought and left in the garage. I painted over the scuffs where Robert's boxes had scraped the hall. I put our wedding photo back on the mantel. I planted rosemary again where the first bush had drowned in too much rain. I paid the HOA fine Owen forgot about because I was tired of being angry at paper. I learned how to log into retirement accounts, which forms needed notarizing, how many copies a courthouse clerk wants before becoming visibly homicidal, and how much of adulthood is simply refusing to look away from unpleasant language. I also learned that grief does not leave when justice arrives. It just has better lighting. At night the house still rang with absence. His laugh was not in the hall, his truck was not in the driveway. No one stole bacon from my pan on Sunday mornings. No one groaned when I set the thermostat too low. No one stood behind me at the sink and kissed my neck while pretending to help with dishes. The first Thanksgiving I spent there alone. I ate pie straight from the bakery box and cried halfway through a football game. At Christmas, I hung the lights crooked on purpose. Some endings do not heal. They become part of your architecture. A year after the funeral, I drove back to the cemetery alone with fresh lilies and a thermos of coffee. The grave had a proper stone by then. Owen Michael Mercer, beloved husband, loyal friend. The grass had grown in thick and even. The sky was clear that day. No thunder, just wind in the pines and the far-off hum of traffic. I brought a folding chair from the trunk, set it beside the grave, and talked to him because I still do that sometimes. I told him about the porch swing, about Tessa getting engaged, about the tomato plants failing again, about how Pastor Reed now asks before bringing casseroles, about how the rosemary finally took. And then I told him about Diane. "You were right," I said. "She moved fast because she was afraid." The wind shifted softly through the trees. I rested my fingers against the carved letters of his name, but I was slower than she counted on. That line stayed with me all the way home. He was buried that day. I was not buried with him. That is the part Diane never understood. She thought widowhood would make me small enough to move. She thought youth meant weakness. She thought grief would fog my eyes so completely that I would sign away my place and thank her for handling it. And instead, grief sharpened around love. Love sharpened around truth. And truth, once given a file number and a witness, can walk a liar clean out of the room. I still miss him every day. I still keep his letter in the top drawer of my nightstand. Sometimes I read the line, "I love you larger than this ending," and have to stop halfway because my eyes blur and my chest goes soft and mean with missing him. But I do not read it like a helpless woman anymore. I read it in my own house, under my own roof, in a life his mother tried to strip from me before the cemetery mud had dried. She wanted me gone by sundown. Instead, I stayed long enough for the truth to outlive her version.